the conversation. You can't see her, but I tell you she's here. You're going to hear from her in a moment. Sirpa Pietikäinen, who is the MEP, who's an MEP, a former Minister of the Environment for Finland, representing the European People's Party. With all our panelists, you will probably know them, and I'm just going to cut to what they're doing now, but they all have illustrious careers and are really, we are very, very fortunate because they are probably the foremost authority on the circular economy on earth right now. So I'm very excited to have them with us. But Sirpa, since 2004, has been serving on the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs. And in addition to her committee assignments, she's been a member of the Parliament's delegation for relations with the People's Republic of China since 2009. And in her capacity of a member of the Committee on Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, she's authored many reports, I'm sure, but including one on organic farming, and of course served as rapporteur on the circular economy. Thank you for joining us, Sirpa. Just give me a hello so I know you're still here.
Hello, Lucy, and happy to be here discussing this exciting and very important topic.
Well, it's wonderful that you've made the time for us. Thank you very much. And our next panelist, Stéphane Arditi, who is Policy Manager for Circular Economy, Products and Waste from the European Environmental Bureau. Hello, Stéphane, you're very welcome. Give us a wave. Thank you. Nice to see you. Again, hugely experienced and invested in circular economy, if I can put it like that. Just to give you a little flavour, Stéphane is in charge of the definition and implementation of European public policy on low carbon and circular economy, influencing the development of legislation. He coordinates campaigns, leads advocacy, does all sorts of very brilliant, important things, and is just the person to answer this question that we're about to pose. Welcome, Stéphane. And this brings us to Mindy O'Brien, coordinator from Voice Ireland. Voice Ireland being Voice of Irish Concern for the Environment. Mindy, give us a little wave there from Howth in Ireland. Very pleased to have you with us. Mindy is an environmental attorney and has been actively involved in environmental issues for over 25 years. Her career also took her to Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. for 6 years, where she worked for several members of Congress and congressional subcommittees. Mindy is now working with the Irish government, or on the Irish government's Circular Economy Working Group, and feeding into Ireland's proposals on the current EU Circular Economy package. Wow, what a panel, thank you all. We've also met the European Green Deal briefly. So we have a little tradition here at the Real Circularity Coalition, which is to get our panelists to answer the big question first as a bit of an icebreaker. I think it's an interesting one, but let's go with it anyway. Don't tell me all your secrets, because we also want to evolve the conversation. So let's go back to that pivotal question. How can we hardwire a real circular economy into the European Green Deal? Sirpa, let's come to you first.
Thank you, Lucy, and sorry once again, I do not have the video connection here. In the forefront of digitalization, Finland do have places where it doesn't have a proper bandwidth for video meetings. Anyway, this is a very good question. And I would say that this is a paradigm change. It's a bit like you can't create a system of how to sail around the world if your worldview is that the world is flat. And it is exactly the same difference with the linear economy and real circular economy. So we need to embed these logics in various pieces of legislations. First, and this is my favorite, is Eco-Design Directive. And that applies to all the goods and products that are imported and produced and sold in European markets. We have to have the horizontal view so that all the products are upgradable, repairable, reusable. We should ban the single-use products where that is appropriate. Now I would like to come to a point of textiles that is increasing problem because there we in the fact have quite a lot of single-use textiles if you look how long they last or don't. And the same goes to planned obsolescence. Well, then the goods should be modular so that you can repair and take the parts for repair. So this is sort of the concept of an eternal product. And then last but not least, when you can't go on that cycle anymore, they should be with the deposit systems with the dutiful producer responsibility and rights. Be recyclable on the highest level, because sort of meshing all the plastics together and creating that kind of a stuff, greenish grayish buckets that no one has very much of a use is not the solution, but creating like PET bottles so that you can recreate new PET bottles. Then you need to have, like in financial sector, you have accounting, you need to have an environmental accounting. So you see throughout the whole life cycle, how much CO2 emissions, how much resources, how much energy, what kind of an energy, what is the impact on the biodiversity, so that you really can sort of set the limit what is significant harm and should not be done, and then favor the best possibilities in industries, whatever that industry is. So monitoring is extremely important. We need to scale up the market surveillance regulation so that we really apply these principles in all of the goods that are imported to the EU. We need an investment on digital platforms, because what is really interesting is that this might change the structure and the concept of goods and industries, because a car might be in the future more of a concept where the batteries go to battery producer and benches go to benches producer and so on, and sort of the Volkswagen or whatever holds only the design concept, or that matter the buildings, so that the ownership and effective use of different buildings parts is on the producers. Then we need up to secure the producer rights, but to boost up the service or lease economy. Why do I buy my mobile phones? Because I don't want to own aluminium or acrylics or cadmium. I just want to have a speed and good connections. And so if they would be forced to be modular and I would lease them, actually they could be designed so that it is a gradual upgrading process instead of having this kind of a goldfish logics coming in and going out. And we need public procurement regulation so that it would be comply or explain. Anything that you buy would need to be circular. And then you would need to explain if some of these cases it can't be made. And what we need, and this is actually coming also with the Circular Economy Action Plan from the Commission, is the product design. Because as you mentioned, Lucy, quite rightly, nowadays we talk a lot of recycling economy. So you create waste and you create products that can't be reused or disassembled and reassembled. And then you just sort of try to force some logical use for that kind of a millions types of plastics, or the pasta sauces in glass jars that are massed and put in the grounds of landfilling. And this is not the solution, as you said. They really need to be designed to be modular, upgradable, reusable, and then recyclable. And that means you need to design out the waste. You need to design out the harmful substances and chemicals from the products, because you don't want to the cumulative process of increasing lead, cadmium, or endocrine disruptors in our chains. And this is just to start with. Then you need the sustainable finance, so that you identify the difference industries who do things better and worse, again with these indicators. And then you create a liability for investors, because if you invest on that kind of industries that is linear and old-fashioned, that means that it is going to be a business risk also in the longer run. So you better actually invest on companies that at least have a transition plan, how they move up in this kind of a circular economy. And last but not least, 2 points. Education, you need the professionals, you need the people on leaderships and CEOs of companies to do it. And you need to educate the people, and especially politicians, that the world is round, because otherwise you can't sell the concept of sailing around it. Sorry for taking quite some of your time, but as you can hear, I get slightly excited about the topic.
I know, I think it's great, and it's your time. This is good. I have a further question for you, Sirpa. Thank you for that, and a very precise and clear itemization of what you think is needed. What percentage of the things that you think are needed are contained in the action plan?
Well, I would say that about 70% has at least the seeds in the action plan. So we talk about sustainable buildings, textiles, farm to fork. There is the renewal of eco-design directive, the product policy, many things. But what I'm a bit worried is about the ambition level. Because if we know that actually the environmental challenges, like the resource challenge, is exponential. So we are using 1.5 planets, and within 30 years we would need more than 3 planets with this kind of an economy what we have. The ambition level should be right, and then I really would put the targets there too. So that means that by 2050, not only climate neutral truly, but we would need to be doing the same benefit for people, for the society and businesses with 10% of the resources that we are using nowadays. So that really means the good old factor 10.
Okay, great. Thank you. There's so much to pick up on there. Thank you very much. Stéphane, I'm going to ask you to please answer the question, how can we hardwire a real circular economy into the European Green Deal? Over to you.
Thank you, Lucy. Hello, everyone. Well, speaking after Sirpa, you know, it's complicated because she basically mentioned all the direction, but let me try to, I would say, echo what she says, but according to a new categorization, I would say. So first, I think if we are serious about circular economy, and I know it's not the topic of today, but it needs to be reflected in the stimulus package for the recovery. I think this is extremely, extremely important, because if we miss this opportunity, we're going to continue wasteful, linear economy. So for me, this is really a priority. And the beauty of circular economy is that basically most of what is good for circular economy is good for recovery. But I think decision makers may not realize this and still tend to say, oh, we're going to inject a bit of money in circular economy that is towards recycling, when they do not necessarily understand that circular economy is not recycling. Circular economy is to be adapted to a whole range of industry, if not all the economy. Second thing, I think, as Sirpa mentioned, it's really important to combine the different instruments we have. And I think we still have the tendency to say, oh, we already have an economic incentive like the ETS. So why do we have to push for product requirement? Why do we have to push for additional information or transparency? And I think this combination of instruments is extremely, extremely important. I just mentioned 3 directions: regulatory requirements such as eco-design type, financial economic incentives such as pricing, carbon pricing externalities, and transparent information to guide consumers toward the most sustainable choice. Then about this, I think it's extremely important to say that the default choice should be the sustainable choice. today you do not ask question about if your TV is going to be on standby just because we've got rules that after a certain amount of time, it needs to be on standby. But today, if you walk in the supermarket, it's still easier to buy excessively packaged goods compared to good with reusable packaging, or it's even easier for public procurement department to go for the cheapest option rather than the most sustainable option, just because they don't have to provide justification. And when I say making sustainable the default choice, it also means it's extremely important, not toxic product and toxic-free services. The third thing I think that Sirpa mentioned a bit around the resource is that we probably need a new compass. We need new metrics. I mean, is GDP something that can grow eternally and lead us to circular economy? I've got doubt about this. So maybe we need to redefine what we understand by prosperity, by progress, how we measure the wealth of our economy. And for example, in a real circular economy, we need to value natural capital, for example, with polluter pay and saver hands principle. Then as a fourth direction or fifth direction, I would say that we also need to, to gaining trust and ownership by citizens. I think at the moment for the people informed by circular economy, it's quite obvious what it is. But if we walk in the street, I mean, the ownership is not yet there. And I think this is a direction that really needs to be promoted. That means that we need more informed decision-making by citizens. The right to repair, for example, is a fundamental right we need to promote. The right to know, which is a very old principle, which is very, very in its infancy when it comes to implementation. So I think without gaining the ownership and trust of the people, we may not unleash the full potential of circular economy, and we may stay in what you call a semi-circular economy rather than a real circular economy. And I would be happy to detail more these 5 directions during the discussion.
Yes, and thank you for that. That was very, very clear, really well articulated. I just have one point that I'd like to pick up on at this now. You're talking about citizens and how they need to almost grasp this. Do you think that we should be more explicit about it? So I'm thinking about the Stockholm Environment Institute has said that in order to stay within planetary boundaries by 2050, the average European would need to reduce their per capita material footprint by 80%. Do you think we should just be really upfront and tell citizens this?
Well, I think
conceptually, that's very clear.
Yeah, that's very clear, but there is one big risk, is if you put the burden on citizens, but you do not provide solutions. So let me give you an example. You know, the plastic industry has for very long said littering is a question of responsibility of the consumer. If consumer were well educated and behaved well, they would put all the plastic in bin and we will not have ocean pollution and stuff like this. But at the end of the day, we have to think, who is offering the possibility to consumer and citizen to reduce by 80% this quota? I mean, it's not about, you know, citizens which are really at the end of the value chain to design the product. And at the moment, if you have no other solution, look what happened with the COVID pandemics. And I don't want to blame anyone, but we see a lot of single-use masks, okay? Maybe because they are more comfortable, I don't know why, but that means that we are coming back to very single-use stuff because of hygienic reason, instead of thinking solution that could meet both our hygienic needs and the circular economy. So I think it's a bit dangerous to put it to the citizen and to say citizens are responsible for the toxicity of product. As a citizen, I've got absolutely no responsibility, no control on what. As a citizen, I've got a heating system, I've got no responsibility of the type of gas injected in the pipe. So I think it's a bit, I would tend to not moralize and put excessive burden on citizens. But what we've realized, every Eurobarometer, at least at EU level, tend to show that people are ready to have more repairable product. They are ready to have more durable product. And it's coming back to what I call the fundamental right to sustainable choice. Today, we've identified the freedom of citizen as buy whatever you want, whenever you want. But I think we've neglected the freedom of consumer to go for sustainable choice. And again, why is convenience and price not aligned with sustainability? Why is linear economy still the cheapest and the most convenient option for citizens? As long as this is the case, this is extremely complicated to ask the millions of citizens to act if, you know, the few big firms that place most of the product on the market do not give them the possibility to act sustainably.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Again, we'll come back to that. I'm very much enjoying this conversation, and let's bring Mindy in. Are you ready to go, Mindy? So you're gonna answer the title question for us. How can we hardwire a real circular economy into the European Green Deal? Over to you.
Yeah, a lot of the issues have already been mentioned by the previous speakers so eloquently, so I will try to build on what they have said. And I think COVID has offered us the opportunity to pivot towards a new sustainable direction. And as Stéphane was saying, we need to build, as Joe Biden would say, build back better. Can we build a better service provision rather than products? I think mainly a big element of this, and what Stéphane was saying, is that we need to put the burden on the producer. They need to be responsible for the ultimate disposal or recirculation of their product. It can't always go on to the consumer. Recycling is I always say it's a tool in our toolbox, but it's not the first one we reach for. The first one we reach for is waste prevention, and how can we keep the natural resources? How can we keep using them over and over? And as was said before, the right to repair, but we also need the right to reuse is an important element of the circular economy. And I think we need to reevaluate our ownership paradigm. Do we need to own everything that we use, or can we borrow it? Can we lease it? Can we share it? And now there are new businesses up and running in Ireland. We have new cup sharing schemes up and running for coffee cups, also for containers, for takeaways. These are kind of on the ground solutions that can be done around the world. My mantra is I want to buy the product or the service, not the packaging. So how can we put systems in place that either I rent the packaging, bring my own packaging, or not use packaging at all? And the main thing is that, you know, you have all the high level discussions about the circular economy, but you need to bring it down to the member states. So in my case in Ireland, but also to the individuals, and how can you achieve behavior change? And again, we need to make it easy for them to make the sustainable choice. Right now, if you go to supermarkets, the easiest thing for you is to grab things wrapped in plastic. And if you want to be more sustainable, you've got to go to zero waste or package-free shops. So that means you might have to go to 5 different shops to do the right thing. We need to mainstream this and put the burden on the supermarkets, require them to provide package-free alternatives where you can buy dry goods, buy spices, nuts with reusable containers. So I work with people all the time, and they just say it's so hard. And their mentality right now is all about recycling, and we want to change that into reuse and have a more sustainable choice to prevent the creation of the waste in the first place. But also there are barriers, and that's what we're facing here on the ground is liability concerns. If I want to repair something, and we have repair cafes where people volunteer to repair items. However, now they're not running because of potential liability. What if something happens to that product? What if, you know, the toaster blows up or something? Who's going to be responsible? So anyway, the liability concerns, food donation, some, you know, food, recipients, food banks don't want to take the food, or the supermarkets don't want to send it to this food banks because of potential liability. So that needs to be addressed country by country. It might be easier in other countries. In Ireland, they're very litigious. Also, we're facing cheap plastic. We need to look at how can we put levies on them to make them equal, make plastic equal to the recycled material. Also, I used to work in Congress years ago. There was efforts to make recycled content requirements for newspapers. This is back in the 1980s and 90s. But can we have, and under the single-use plastic directive, they said 30% recycled content for drinks bottles. Can we make that applicable to all products to increase, because right now the recycled market, the material, the price for the material is quite low because there's no demand. We need to create the demand for that product and make sure that products require the recycled content. And as you were saying, between individuals, a lot of people know that we need to do better, but there's a knowledge action gap. So people know they should be doing better, but they just feel overwhelmed, life gets in the way, and so they don't do anything about it. And so again, we need to make it easy for the individual to do the right thing. So those are a few of things I wanted to mention on the ground.
Thank you, and I think that was really amazing insight that you've given to us, and you know, about local projects, about what is actually working on the ground, and drawing in, you know, the breadth of experience, including from the States. And Sirpa, I want to come to you at this point and ask you a couple of things, picking up on what Mindy is talking about, and she's talking about the characteristics of the national characteristics and tendencies, which might include being litigious, for example, and risk averse because of a tendency to be litigious. And this is something that's true, isn't it? That a lot of these ways of embedding circular economy into society are problematic, because I'm thinking of COVID, which Mindy also mentioned. I was on our news program the other day representing the Real Circularity Coalition on the Today program. And one of the things that everyone was complaining about was the rise in disposable masks, which Stéphane also mentioned, and litter or fugitive plastic because of COVID. But we also have a situation where coffee chains are not accepting reusable cups. Some of them are not accepting reusable cups because they say of an increased risk. So we seem to have a propensity in society to increase our non-recyclable or disposable things that we use as soon as we can, and to shut away or shut down our circular behaviors that we've spent years building up. And I'm wondering how we can counteract that, and what is the best way of, how can the European Green Deal help with that? Are there any elements, or is it completely separate?
Well, about the Green Deal, first I just would like to endorse what was said about this huge 1,000 billion amount of recovery funds. They should be channeled totally to support this circular and sustainable businesses and economy. And the sorry part of the answer is that I do not see that happening at the moment. Then secondly, this is a part of the answer, I second what was said there, that we always shoulder the responsibility on consumers, but you don't shoulder that, okay, I don't know if that food is contaminated or poisoned. It's on your responsibility to find it out. We do not say that, okay, I don't know if this car has brakes or not. It's your responsibility to make wise choices. So we have this kind of a division on the mind that some issues of safety, the economic side, the ownership, and you can mention them, they are self-clear, and you say, of course, you need to regulate it and not to put on the individual consumers thing. But then again, when you come to the environment, it seems to be a bit of the preference issue, like the parsley on the bread. You might have it or you might not have it, and if you wish, it's up to you to do something to get it. And if you sort of link to that, the thinking what we have, that the recycled or reused is somehow second-class thing. It isn't as new, it isn't as good. And actually you are recycling, reusing your clothes. It isn't anymore new. when you have worn it the first time, or your bag, or drove in your car. So there we do not have this kind of a stigma, but in other ways and fields that exists, and as you said with the masks, even though there's tons of studies that the reusable masks, if you wash them, are as safe than single use, then they are still regarded and advised by medical and health authorities to be second best. Or reusable cups. Or then you are afraid of the hygiene in places that actually are not sterile operation theaters. And that is the set of the mind that is peculiar, and maybe it would help if someone would just sort of reveal, disclose this sort of a bias in our thinking, and actually to combat it at the same time is this regulation. We need to ensure the right for the consumer to have sustainable products and repairable products. We need to have the regulation who puts the recycled materials on as default choice, and so on and so on. And then when you get used to it, after a while, it is quite clear to everybody. I'm not sure if I answered your question, but it's very much mental thing.
Yes, I think you're talking. Yeah, I think the bias in our thinking that you mentioned, and then you've got the regulation that will change the circumstances, change the landscape, and it's really a question, isn't it, about how we bring those two things together. I wanted to go back to something that you mentioned right at the start of your answer when you were responding to Stéphane, talking about the recovery packages, these multi-billion-dollar recovery packages, and about them going the wrong way, we've heard a lot about. How do we apply pressure? Where can we apply pressure at this point? I mean, you suggested that they weren't listening, and you suspected that that money is often going to go the wrong way. Where can we apply pressure, or is it simply too late?
It's not yet too late. The negotiations are going on inside the parliament, and then the next round is between the parliament and council. The first and foremost would be that anyone you can activate, and if you can activate the industries, because indeed, both in financial sector and other industries, there are a lot of those ones who would benefit from this kind of approach. They should lobby all the political parties, their respective parliaments, their governments. Look, what are you doing there on these negotiations when it comes to EU level? And then again, send millions of letters or emails or whatever pigeons you want to MEPs. Because I've seen very understandable but astonishing or astonished how strong phenomenon it is that MEPs and politicians are divided. There are these of us that think that now you need the agility and you need to accelerate your actions, and good that you have the money. Then you see those ones that, who say, oh, hold your horses. We have a COVID crisis and economic crisis, and let's deal with this first. And they are even asking that you should have a moratorium on climate targets and environmental regulation, because you have to save the economy. And we are just talking a total different kind of a language, because they duly think that this way you save the economy, and somehow then after 10 years you can come back on environmental issues. And they do not genuinely believe when you say that, look, this is the only way how you actually save the economy. And so we are drifting more and more apart. And actually people are, in my party and in the parliament, they are getting irritated and even hostile against each other. And this is not a good atmosphere to make a good politics, but you would need to pressurize your politicians to be hard and ambitious on these issues. This is my advice.
Okay, great. I mean, we are very ambitious, because we have written several letters, very broad-based letters from the Real Circularity Coalition, and been pushing in the media very hard to align real circular economy to green recovery. Stéphane, I just wanted to ask you, and then also Mindy as well, because you have so much experience in advocacy as well. But I'm just thinking, when we talk about the circular economy, the real circular economy, we as enthusiasts and practitioners, we will always talk about the job opportunities, for example, and a recent study estimates that applying circular economy principles has the potential to increase EU GDP by an additional 0.5% by 2030, creating around 700,000 new jobs. I mean, shouldn't that be the selling point of this, Stéphane?
Well, I think this should be a selling point. And in fact, this is a selling point. But as Sirpa mentioned, still, you know, the risk of losing the job of today is always prevailing, I would say, on the job creation of tomorrow. And for example, this is a clear case we see in the recovery package. You know, people tend to think if we give the money to current business with current workers, we save the job, and it's always easier for them than to say, well, we're going to give the money to shift, you know, the worker ability to what fits the circular economy. So the job is a very, very important argument. The one I will challenge more is the 0.5% GDP, to be honest. If I'm a citizen in the street and you come to me and you say, it's going to create job, I can understand it. But if you tell me, oh, it's going to increase the GDP of Europe by 0.5%, and you say, and what's for me in that, you know? So I think speaking about GDP and growth is probably an obsolete narrative if you want to convince people. And I think things which is very important, there is no real circular economy without distributing wealth. The well-being that people can understand, you know, you're going to live longer, you're going to be less polluted, you're going to spend less time in the hospital. That can be convincing stuff. But 0.5 GDP, you know, if it's just to concentrate a bit further, you know, the wealth in a few hands, what's for me in this kind of indicator? So I think we really need to change, you know, the metrics and how we present this. And when it comes to jobs, it is clear that we have a job blackmail issue, and it's not linked to circular economy. It's linked to everything. We want to detoxify, and then we hear the chemical industry saying, oh, but you're going to risk cutting job. We want to increase energy efficiency of appliances, but people say, oh, yes, but you're going to put job at risk because we cannot invest at the moment. So I think at some point, we also need to get a bit less dependent on this job narrative. We are convinced that anyway, we create more jobs through circular economy. It is so simple to understand. Circular economy is to make the best in terms of value capturing of each unit of material. If today you say you invest in an incinerator before you have repaired the product, reuse, repurpose the material, recycle the material, and you give the money to burning it immediately, you lose all the job opportunity. So this is so obvious, I think, and that's something that now need to be transformed in how to. So it's not only to say it could create this amount of job, but explaining to people, okay, look, your investment, how much job can you create with this? Can we have an alternative scenario? Give me the same money. Where and how can we invest it and create more job? And as long as we haven't made this kind of thorough investigation, we should say, hold on before investing. And I think this could be a solution to the stimulus package, because at the moment, the stimulus package, it's all about saving jobs that exist, but not necessarily investigating with the same amount of money invested otherwise. And will I create potentially more jobs? And I think this is not yet done. And if we all would build on this job creation narrative, but start asking, okay, can we please step back and analyze where we will create more jobs beyond just rescuing the one which are here today and maybe endangered tomorrow, because we will create stranded asset, because we will be in lock-in effect. I think this is very, very important. And one thing that I want to also mention in terms of, and I think Sirpa mentioned it, and it's extremely important at tube level, and it's beyond the job question, is that we have an energy efficiency target. We have a climate target. Where is the equivalent material footprint target? Where is the equivalent driver to all sectors of our economy to save the resources? So today, in a way, I'm sorry, to contribute to the renewable energy target, I can still build an incinerators, and that will, you know, really spoil a lot of circular economy opportunity, and we do not have the resource use material footprint reduction target to kind of balance this kind of silo approach in terms of renewable energy or climate only focus.
Okay, thank you. That's an incredibly important point. So if I understand, so the lack of targets and this siloed approach are creating these contradictory scenarios, essentially. Okay, let's come back to that in a second, if you don't mind, but I would like to ask Mindy, help me out here, Mindy. We've got lots and lots of discussion about how we get these narratives out and whether we're using the right one or the wrong one. What is your prescription?
I agree. It's a great job potential. We were just talking about disposable PPE, and right now we're shipping in Ireland. We're an island. We're shipping it all in from abroad, so that means it's not very resilient. So if we could have a system that we have reusable gowns, reusable items, you can launder them commercially here, and it would create an industry here. Same with drinks containers. Right now we're about to adopt a deposit refund scheme for disposable plastic and aluminum cans. However, that's a single-use option. We should also use a deposit refund scheme for bottles, reusable glass bottles. You can use them over and over again, up to 50 times, which is being done in Germany. It's being done in Oregon. It would diversify our jobs market. Right now in Dublin, we've got loads of people working here, but in the rural areas, we don't have as many people, which means in Ireland, it's very unsustainable job-wise, it's unsustainable traffic-wise. People are waiting in cars for a long time, traffic jams, but also housing. People can't find housing in Dublin. So what we need to do with the circular economy is divest, have local jobs around the country, revitalize villages through these reuse networks, through these repair networks, creating jobs, and adhering to this concept of a 15-minute town, where everything you need is within 15 minutes. You're repairing items, you're buying goods, your job. So it's more sustainable, you know, both with the goods that we're producing, but also economically, that we have jobs, and socially that you build a stronger community. So those are kind of areas I'd like to tap on.
Okay, thank you. That 15-minute town thing is really fascinating. I wish we had more time, but you know, maybe we can talk about that another time. I'm just gonna notice that actual time, and I just want to take a couple of questions that we have here. So Griffin is asking, do requirements for recycled content do more harm than good by working against more innovative approaches? And in fact, would it be possible to meet these requirements in a truly circular economy with high rates of reuse? I think that's a good question. Sirpa, do you have any answers to that?
Well, I think that it depends how you regulate it. If that is sort of a very stiff regulation, saying that every product has to have at least 50% of recycled content, that probably does it. But if it is this kind of a hierarchy that the product must meet these circular economy hierarchy targets, and it can be done either via the service economy or using sort of more effectively the modularity, or then having the recycled content, then it gives the flexibility, and you could do it either more innovative way Or then I won't tell it that I won't claim that it is perfect, but in Finland we have these PET bottles that circulate as drinking bottles. And it is way out 80% of the bottles that we get back because there's very substantially high deposit system there. And so they are producing new drinking bottles out of them. If that is not perfect, at least it's better than smashing all the plastics together. And so you could either have reusable bottles or your own bottles, or you could have this kind of a system. So that would give the possibility for different kind of solutions, because we do not always know what is the best one.
Okay, thank you. David Greenfield asks, Stéphane, maybe you can help with this one. Should we be deciding on solutions based on Scope 3 carbon modelling?
Well, I'm not necessarily an expert on this, but the way I've understood it is that we should, in the Scope 3, integrate, I would say, what we call consumption-based emissions. So please, David, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is clearly a must for the promotion of circular economy. As long as we completely neglect the embodied emission in our material, in our consumption patterns, we can simply get to our climate objective by outsourcing the most polluting activities, or just by continuing to say, let's extract elsewhere and use what we need here. So if by Scope 3, I follow you right, and it's about considering consumption-based, and that means embodied carbon emission, I think this is a very important hook for the circular economy. And in fact, when you try to bridge more circular economy and climate, this is one of the main arguments. Let's give you an example. We recently applauded the 55% announcement by the Commission, but it is still based on, the CO2 we produce here in Europe. And according to estimate we have, if you add up the embodied emission, you've got at least 15% more CO2 emission based on consumption. And then suddenly you say, okay, but going from 55 to 60 depends on the baseline. And if you suddenly consider the larger baseline and embodied carbon, you also you unleash more possibilities. So also in line with what Sirpa mentioned in terms of providing flexibility. If suddenly I say for building, what I target is total net decarbonization, and you can get to that by increasing drastically the energy efficiency of the building, but also by using, more carbon, a lower carbon product, because you will save on embodied carbon. Suddenly you see you also open up, the possibility for innovative practice in, for example, the building sector. So if I got your rail, David, yes, absolutely. It's super important to have.
Okay, so David says, yes, you have. You've understood. Okay. That's correct. Yes, consumption-based. He also adds that we've done some interesting modelling on Scope 3 for waste creating.
Maybe let me just react to the question before, I think, by the previous speaker about recycle. I think one thing which is important, it may be counterproductive to put recycle content requirement if you do not ensure that recycled material is at the same, level of cleanliness with regard toxic contents as virgin material. Then you can have really, really counterproductive effect by re-injecting, and diluting even in the economy and along the value chain, the toxic. But if not, I do not see why we should not set, recycle content requirement, as long as we do it smartly. Because the clear answer is that let's imagine plastic, as long as you do not put recycle plastic content requirement, and you do not close, the tap for importing virgin plastic, the solution will not be, unfortunately, innovative solution. It will be consuming more of the virgin plastic. So I think, again, this is a matter of condition. If you have recycled content, but making sure it's exactly the same level of toxicity or not worse than virgin material. Or, for example, if you close the tap of virgin plastic, and there is just a report just released about closing, you know, the use of virgin plastic by 2050 with scenario modeling that has just been released, I think, yesterday. But please, we should not kill this idea of setting recycled content requirement.
Okay, thank you. And I'll pass on David's details to you as well, because he said if you'd like to talk further, he would like that. He's at Dr. Resources on Twitter. He's very active on Twitter. Sirpa, can I just come back to you? Do you know why that Scope 3 wasn't used to model the action plan? Or maybe it was, maybe I've misunderstood. Is she still here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Just my finger is a bit slow unmuting myself. No, I do not know why it was not used. And actually, there are a lot of good elements in the circular economy action plan, so I don't want to be bashing it too much. But as I mentioned earlier on my opinion, it lacks the ambition level, it lacks the targets, it lacks some sort of, how would I put it, integrity on it. And now I'm not blaming the civil servants in the commission, but of course, always before you put anything up front, it needs to be approved by the college and all of the commissioners. And it seems, as earlier on discussed, that we didn't get it right in many places, and there this action 3 is a bit of the some list of issues that were not yet there. But let's hope that the Parliament can add it.
Okay, let's hope the Parliament can add it. And we do have the action plan, and as you say, there are things that are very good and right about it. So I'd like to end this session, because we're coming up to time, with each of you picking something that you think it doesn't have to be in the action plan, but it can be, that you think is a potential game changer and that you are very pleased that we have, that shows progress. So Sirpa, maybe I'll just come straight back to you and ask you if there's a particular element that you are particularly infused or heartened by.
A bit dull subjects, but it is indicators. You get what you measure. And then the sustainable finance, so that you incentivize the investments and money to avoid in future the high risk investments, environmentally high risky.
I think that's a great answer. We always get very excited by indicators at the Real Circularity Coalition, so we like that one. Mindy, we haven't heard from you for a while, so I'm going to come straight to you if that's okay.
I'm trying to remember. I haven't read the plan in ages.
You can go off plan if you like.
Yeah, no, I think the farm to fork is really important. The Green Deal. Are you talking about the circular? Can we include the farm to fork?
Not really. No. I want the circular economy.
The circular economy. I'd like to have more targets for reuse and waste reduction, and so and I think that the circular economy includes the 50% food reduction, right, by 2030. That's in that. That's not in that one.
You can tell us. I'm only joking. Tell us why you like. Tell us why you like the farm to fork.
No. It's just, I don't know if I like the farm to fork, but I just think we need to really tackle the food waste issue, and we need it. It's such a huge element of, in Ireland, we're throwing away 1 million tons a year. I think in Europe, it's 90 million tons a year, somewhere around there. It's a lot of food that needs to be used for consumption or just reduced. So I know it's a 50% reduction, but we have to figure out how to do it. And that's the hardest thing, is the implementation, and that's where it all comes down to. And I mean, our government has said that they want 50% reduction. Fantastic. How are you going to do it? Mm-hmm. And so we need to put more of the pressure on the retailers and on the food providers. Consumers have their role to play, but I think a lot of it has to do with the supermarkets and retailers. So that's kind of my input there.
Yeah,
sorry.
That's great. No, that's good. Do not apologize. That was great input. And Stéphane, we're going to finish with you picking out something really great.
Okay, very quickly, what I prefer in the Circular Economy Action Plan is the promise to make sustainable product the norm, because if we are serious about this, that means non-toxic, sustainably made, and by sustainably, we also implies working condition and social rights along the value chain. The things I like the less, I would say, and where I think there is a huge potential which needs to be mobilized, is about the trade policy. Because if we think the trade policy is a form of unsubordinated policy, but itself, the own goal is just to trade and trade and trade. And I think the day we can say, okay, circular economy or sustainable provision in trade is not using exceptional rule out of the World Trade Organization, but is becoming, the default rules. And in fact, when you are not trading sustainable product, you need to go through a special procedure. Then we will really, really have a game changer. And I think you can lead on this by saying we're going to be tough on trade, and we're going to be tough on a World Trade Organization reform to make sure that whatever is traded with you, for example, is sustainable.
Do you mean the UK?
Well, UK and any other country, but I mean, can we still import fracking gas in you just to please US? I'm sorry, this is completely. Can we still trade, toxic products that are not permitted on our market? I'm questioning this. And can we import soya made or chicken made in conditions that are not acceptable in Europe? The day we say no, we set some standard about what we accept in our market, and we try to collaborate with other countries to also respect their rules and the way what they think is right, and we transform the trade in that direction rather than to the bottom line with regards to sustainability standard. We have also a game changer at global level. So that's something that really needs to be investigated according to me.
That's a fascinating place to leave it. I think we need to do another session on trade now. I want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us. Our figures kind of went up at one point, so I don't know if word was spreading about the quality of the panelists, but thank you for staying with us. I know a few people had to leave because we've gone very slightly over, but we really do appreciate it. We would love to talk more to you about the Real Circularity Coalition. Please do get in touch. We are on Twitter, as I said, at Real Circularity. And we'd love to tell you more. And we can see from today's discussion that we have a lot of really good base work and a lot of really, really important avenues to explore. And we're giving this 100%. We really are working very hard on it. And now is the time. Now is the opportunity. And also, what a crisis if we don't get in where we should. So I want to say a massive thank you to our panelists, to Sirpa, to Mindy, and to Stéphane. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've got so much out of this conversation. I just want to play it back and take notes. But thank you all for giving up your time, because I know you are so busy. We really appreciate it. This will lead somewhere, I promise you. And thank you for joining us again. And please come back for the next session, which we will hold next month. We'll post details about that very, very soon. So let's keep talking and let's keep forming this community, because it's very powerful and it's very, very important. My name is Lucy Siegle, and I will see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Sirpa. Thanks.